Hi, this is Jeff from cellarleather.com, and I'd like to introduce a new edge painting jig that was designed by my wife Nancy Taylor to make it easier to paint your edges of your belts. This is the actual jig here that I'll be working with. I'll explain more to you about it. We use the jig. I've adapted a maple syrup container that has a large base to it that houses the edge paint that you put in it, whether it be black or brown, and a sponge, which you can purchase at any Tandy Leather or Weaver Leather Supply, and a slicker. It's a plastic slicker with little grooves in it for different thicknesses of belts to use to finish and slick the edges of the belts. And that's really what you need. I'm going to work with just a regular used one that I've been painting with, and apply some to the brush. Excuse me, it's my brush, but it's really a sponge. And pick up where we left off here. We started applying this, and you just run it along. When you apply the edge paint to your sponge, you try not to put too much on in the beginning so it doesn't puddle and fall off. Sometimes you can just push it on and blow a little bit of it off, like so, just to dissipate it a little bit so it doesn't come off in one blob. And you just lightly feather into it and push down until you get even pressure. And I like to go back and forth a little bit because it actually gets the edge paint into the grain of the leather rather than going just in one direction. So you make several passes on it, and this will be the first of at least 2 coats to get the right finish on the edge. So this is basically all the time it takes to do one run on one belt. You can see both sides very easily with the jig up in the air a little bit like this off the bench, and you also can lift it up tiny bit to actually look at the top to make sure you're not going over. That's what's important about the jig and the size of it. It's easy to maneuver and much easier to see what you're doing, and keep the belt as still as possible when you turn it. So if you ever happen to think you got a little bit over the top of it, which doesn't look like I did here at all, but if you do, you just take your little finger and you just kind of wipe it towards you and take it off, and always have a towel on your lap to take care of it. So you work a couple belts at a time because you have to wait for the drying time of the other one before you can slick it with the plastic slicker. So we're going to just basically do the same thing. This is an 1¼ tooled belt, black tooled belt, which we're also going to use the black edge paint on. And you start off the same way, just being very careful, even pressure, not too much on your brush. When I say brush, just know that I'm talking about the sponge, because to me it's a brush. It's my palette. You continue doing that the same way as I did with the first one, and just follow your sponge all the way down the belt. Now, in the time that this is being applied, it's just about enough time for that to set up on the first belt that we did to start doing the slicking of it. And by the time this one is finished, that other one should be just about set up enough that I can show you the slicking part of it. I always cover these things up for a little bit in between because it's less air and they don't dry out quite as much. So we'll put the second one down. We're going to pick up the first one that we already did. It's dry to the touch. I can tell it's a tiny bit tacky, but it's dry to the touch. It's not coming off on me. So you're going to take your slicker, and I use this a couple different ways. This is the groove that's made for your 8 to 10 ounce weight leathers, or even a little bit heavier. You just rub this along and kind of turn it a little bit so you're catching both sides of the edge. And you rub it not too hard because you don't want to burnish it off completely because it's still a little bit new. You can go over it with the top of it too. You can also use that to do it. So you've got that first pass on that done. And then you take your tip and you roll the edge just a little bit, which takes off that little bit of edge from stripping the leather and gives it a nice round finished smooth professional edge. And this is pretty much the first step involved in step 1 with this first belt. Now you can see if you look at this over here, and I always use my hands like this. I rub it through and I can feel how good the edge is. aside from just rubbing it with the plastic. And you look at it, and you don't have anything over on the top, which you've checked before when you were putting it on, and the back looks pretty good. So you're ready to do your second coat on that. So you just go back to the same procedure that you did before. Apply your edge paint, spread it out a tiny bit, and you're doing the exact same thing, only this basically, for the most part, depending on the leather, but for the most part, this can be your finish. This will be your last coat that you'll have to put on. Some leathers, the edges of the grains of the leather, depending on the type of leather, whether it's buffalo or cowhide, or the type of tannage that it is, the tightness of the grain and the fibers will determine if you need to put a third coat on it. It also has a little bit to do with how you edge paint, how you bevel the edges when you cut your leather to do the edge beveling. So this is basically the end of that side. We let that dry, just as we did the first time, and then we go over it very lightly again with the slicker. This is obviously the first coat on the second belt. But that's all you would end up doing to the second belt after the second coat is on. Check it like that, look at your edges, and it's done. That's a wrap. That's pretty much all you need to know about it. The jig, as you can see, is it's wood, it's lightweight. I would tell you exactly. It's approximately 39 inches long and 5 inches wide, a little bit less than 5 inches wide, and easily usable, and can be found at cellarleather.com.
Say it again.
Yeah, anytime you want. If you'd like any questions, just go to cellarleather.com, and you can go to info@cellarleather.com to ask me a question through the website email, or you can purchase it.